Daniel Cole never thought his name would be called for something so strange. He had worked in the diplomatic corps for 3 years, mostly handling paperwork, arranging meetings, and carrying bags for senior officials. He was not a soldier, not a scientist, not even a high-level negotiator. Yet one quiet morning in the great city of New Geneva, his life turned upside down. The notice came as a sealed message on his datapad. Assignment: sleep companion to alien diplomat Saraith of the Lumine. Daniel had to read it 3 times before he believed it. He even laughed at first, thinking it was a mistake or some cruel joke from his friends. A sleep companion? For a diplomat? Was that even real? But when he reported to his supervisor, the tall and serious Ambassador Linton, there was no laughter. The ambassador explained carefully. The Lumine are unlike us, Daniel. Their biology is different. Their minds need connection during sleep. They cannot rest properly without the presence of another being nearby. Normally they have their families, their partners, or their own kind to do this. But Sarai, she came here alone, for peace talks, and she has no one. Daniel frowned, shifting uncomfortably. And you want me to, what? Lie beside her while she sleeps? Not in the way you're imagining, Linton said firmly, reading Daniel's awkward tone. It's not physical. It's about presence. Simply being near her, breathing, existing in the same room helps her mind settle. She has requested assistance, and after long discussion, we agreed to assign a human volunteer. Your name was chosen, Daniel tried to protest. But why me? I'm not special. I'm not trained for this. That is exactly why, Linton replied. You are ordinary but reliable. You have no political weight, no hidden agenda. You can be trusted. And Daniel, this is important. If Sarai cannot sleep, she cannot think. If she cannot think, the peace talks will collapse. Whole systems are waiting for her guidance. Do you understand the responsibility? The words sank into Daniel's chest like heavy stones. This was no silly mistake. This was real. His simple presence, his steady breathing, might hold together a fragile peace between 2 civilizations. He nodded slowly. I understand. That evening, Daniel was taken to the diplomat's residence. The building was tall, sleek, shining with silver glass that caught the orange glow of the sunset. Guards stood at every corner, their faces unreadable. Inside, the halls smelled faintly of sweet herbs and strange flowers, alien scents that made him both curious and nervous. A soft-voiced attendant led him through, speaking in whispers. The Lady Sarai has been restless. She has not rested for 3 days. Her eyes burn with fatigue. Please, be kind. Daniel swallowed, his steps echoing on the polished floor. He felt like a child being led into a temple. At last, the door opened to a wide chamber. The air was dim, lit only by a round lamp glowing like the moon. Curtains hung like flowing water along the walls. In the center was a resting couch, not a bed exactly, but something between a cushion and a nest. And there she was, Sarai. She rose slowly to her feet when Daniel entered. Her form was tall and graceful, wrapped in flowing robes that shimmered faintly like silver threads. Her skin carried a soft violet tone, smooth and clear. Her eyes, large, luminous, deep as midnight seas, studied him carefully. You are the human? Her voice was soft, melodic, carrying an echo that seemed to touch the air itself. Daniel's mouth felt dry. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Daniel Cole, at your service. She tilted her head slightly, almost like a bird watching something new. Then with a slow breath, she said, They send me a stranger to share my silence. Daniel's hands tightened behind his back. He wanted to explain, to say he meant no harm, but she turned away, motioning him closer. Come, she said simply. The night is long and I am tired. The first night was the strangest experience of Daniel's life. He sat awkwardly on the edge of the resting couch, keeping a polite distance. Sarai settled on the other side, curling her long arms gracefully, her eyes closing as though she carried centuries of weight upon them. At first, nothing happened. The room was quiet, filled only with the sound of their breaths. Daniel counted the seconds, wondering how long it would take before she fell asleep. His own heart beat too loudly in his ears, then something subtle shifted. Sarai exhaled a trembling sigh as if releasing chains around her chest. Her posture softened, her body relaxed. Her breaths became deeper, steadier, and Daniel realized she was sleeping. He blinked in surprise. Just like that, with him sitting nearby, she had found peace. He leaned back slowly, careful not to disturb her. He stared at the curtains swaying gently, at the soft light painting the chamber, at the alien diplomat who had crossed stars only to find herself utterly alone. Until now. Somewhere inside him, something stirred. A quiet sense of responsibility. He whispered to himself, "All right, Sarai, I'll stay." The following day, Daniel was summoned again. Ambassador Linton met him with relief. She slept. For the first time in 3 days. "You did well, Daniel." "Very well." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "I didn't do anything, I just sat there." "Sometimes doing nothing is everything," the ambassador replied. From then on, Daniel's assignment became nightly. Every evening he entered Sarai's chamber, sat nearby and watched over her as she drifted into sleep. The first few nights were silent. She did not speak much. She hardly even looked at him. She simply rested, letting his presence anchor her mind, but gradually the silence began to break. One evening, as Daniel took his usual seat, Sarai opened her eyes instead of closing them. She studied him with quiet curiosity. "Human," she said softly. "Why do you not fear me?" Daniel blinked. "Fear you? Why would I?" Her gaze darkened slightly. "My people are not like yours. Our shapes, our voices, our minds. Many humans look at me with unease. You sit beside me each night without trembling. Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because you're not frightening. You're just tired, lonely maybe." Her eyes widened just slightly, a flicker of surprise in them. Then she looked away, whispering, "Lonely. Yes, that word fits." A silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. That night she slept more peacefully than before. By the end of the week, Daniel began to notice small changes. Sarai would greet him with a nod instead of silence. Sometimes she asked him simple questions. About Earth's oceans, about the food humans ate, about the way the stars looked from his home. Daniel answered in his simple way, never dressing up his words. And in return, she would share small fragments of her own world. Her people, the Lumine, lived under twin moons that shone with silver light. Their nights were never fully dark, always touched with a glow. Families slept together in large halls, their breaths harmonizing in rhythm, their dreams linked through closeness. To be alone, she explained, was considered dangerous for the spirit. Daniel listened, fascinated. For the first time, he began to understand why his presence mattered so much. One night, when she had already begun to drift, Sarai whispered a sentence that lingered in Daniel's mind long after she fell asleep. "Thank you, human, for sitting in the dark with me." Daniel sat still, watching her calm breathing, and he realized something important. This was no ordinary duty. It was not a joke, not a mistake. He had been given the chance to hold someone's loneliness in his hands and keep it from swallowing her whole. He leaned back, whispering again, "You're welcome, Sarai, I'll be here." The night stretched on. The stars shone faintly beyond the window. And for the first time, Daniel felt that his ordinary life had found an extraordinary purpose. The second week of Daniel's assignment began quietly, almost too quietly. Each evening he walked the long halls of the diplomat's residence, greeted the silent guards, and stepped into Sarai's chamber. The ritual became familiar, the dim lamp glowing like the moon, the soft curtains swaying like water, and the resting couch where she waited. At first, Daniel thought he was simply performing a duty. Sit nearby, breathe, let her rest, nothing more. But as the nights passed, he realized this duty was changing him. Every time he watched her fall asleep, every time her tense shoulders relaxed, every time her breathing grew calm because he was there, he felt something stir inside him, a strange mixture of responsibility and empathy. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, the solitary diplomat who carried peace on her shoulders yet struggled to find rest in her own chamber. One evening, Sarai did not lie down immediately. Instead, she sat upright, her luminous eyes fixed on Daniel as he entered. "You always come," she said softly, almost as if testing him. Daniel shrugged gently. "That's the assignment. I'm supposed to be here." Her gaze lingered on him, deep and searching. "Many would treat it as burden. Yet you arrive on time. You sit in silence without complaint. Why?" Daniel scratched the back of his neck. Because I guess I don't see it as a burden. You need me here, right? So I'll stay. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she lowered her head slightly, a gesture that felt both regal and vulnerable at the same time. Then I thank you. It was the first time she had ever thanked him directly. That night, when she finally rested, Daniel noticed how quickly she fell asleep. Her breathing smoothed out in minutes, and he realized his presence no longer felt like a strange arrangement. It was becoming something natural. As the days turned to nights, the silence between them began to fade. Sarai was cautious at first, speaking only a few words before drifting off. She would ask about small things. Human, what sound do your oceans make at night? Daniel would answer with patience, like 1,000 whispers. Waves breaking, soft and endless. Another night, she asked, what color is the dawn on your world? Daniel smiled faintly. It changes. Sometimes gold, sometimes pink, sometimes red like fire. Depends on the clouds. And sometimes she asked things that made Daniel pause. Do humans ever fear being alone in the dark? Daniel hesitated, then admitted, yes, a lot of us do. But we don't always talk about it. Some pretend they're fine. She closed her eyes at that, whispering, then we are not so different. The more they spoke, the more Daniel saw glimpses of the person behind the title, Diplomat. Sarai was not only an official or a representative of her people. She was a soul carrying weight she could not share with anyone else. Her voice carried loneliness in it, even when she asked simple questions. One night, she revealed something deeper. When I was chosen to come here, she said, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Many of my kin said I was strong enough to bear solitude. They believed I could stand apart alone among strangers, but they did not understand. No Lamine is ever meant to be alone. Every night our families sleep side by side, feeling each other's warmth, hearing each other's breath. To be apart from that is like cutting a root from the tree. Daniel listened quietly. He didn't know what to say, but he didn't need to. She didn't want grand words. She just wanted someone to hear her. That night, she fell asleep with less tension than usual, as if speaking her truth had lifted part of her burden. But Daniel's role wasn't always easy. There were nights when he struggled with the strangeness of it all. He would sit in the dark, restless, wondering if he truly belonged there. Was he really making a difference, or was he just a placeholder until the peace talks ended? One night, while Sarai slept, Daniel whispered softly to himself, what am I doing here? I'm just a clerk, not a diplomat, not a soldier, not even important. To his surprise, her eyes opened slowly, half dreaming, half awake. Do not say that, she murmured. Daniel stiffened. You heard me? Her gaze was heavy with sleep, but her words were clear. You think yourself ordinary. But to me, your presence is life. Without you, my mind breaks. Without you, I do not rest. Tell me, is that not important? Daniel's throat tightened. He had no answer. When she drifted back into sleep, he sat in silence, her words echoing in his chest. For the first time, he truly believed his role mattered. The days outside their chamber carried tension. Rumors spread in the city about the peace talks. Some humans distrusted the Lumine, whispering fears about their strange customs. Some aliens questioned whether humans were trustworthy partners at all. Daniel felt the pressure whenever he walked the streets. He heard fragments of conversations. Why do we bow to alien demands? They're hiding something. Humans can't trust them. And yet each night when he stepped into the chamber and sat near Sarai, all that noise fell away. In the quiet of her presence, the politics of the world seemed distant. It was not about nations or treaties or agendas. It was simply about two beings, one human, one alien, sharing silence so one could sleep. As their bond grew, Daniel began to notice the small details. Sarai's hands always folded gently when she rested, as if holding something fragile. When she dreamed, her fingers sometimes twitched, and a faint hum escaped her throat like a song too soft for words. Sometimes, she would wake briefly and look at him before drifting back. The look carried no demand, no authority, just quiet reassurance that he was still there. Daniel found himself waiting for those small signs, almost cherishing them. One night he even asked her a question of his own. Sarai, do you dream? Her eyes opened halfway. Always. What about? She hesitated, then whispered, home, the twin moons, the sound of my kin breathing around me. Sometimes I dream of a hall filled with light where no one is ever alone. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. That sounds beautiful. Her lips curved faintly, the closest thing to a smile he had seen. Perhaps one day you will see it. The nights continued. Slowly, Daniel's awkwardness faded. He no longer sat stiffly waiting for morning. Instead, he allowed himself to relax, leaning back against the couch, closing his eyes for short moments while keeping his ears alert to her breathing. Sometimes, he even drifted into half-sleep, lulled by the rhythm of her calm breaths. It surprised him how natural it became, two beings worlds apart sharing the same silence. But not everyone approved. One evening, as Daniel walked into the chamber, a stern alien aide stood in the hall. His eyes were sharp, his tone cold. "Human, remember your place. You are not her equal. You are her assignment." Daniel said nothing, but the words stayed with him. That night, as Sarai slept peacefully, he wondered if he was crossing some invisible line. Was he getting too close? Was he forgetting his role? Yet, when Sarai stirred in her sleep and whispered his name, the doubt faded. The first nights were not only about silence and rest, they were about trust. Daniel began to realize that Sarai's peace depended not only on his presence, but on his consistency. She trusted him to be there every night without fail, and trust once given was a heavy thing to carry. One night, when the lamp burned lower than usual, she spoke before drifting off. "Daniel, I do not know how long I must stay on your world, but if the nights are many, will you still come?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "As long as you need me." Her eyes softened at that, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Then I will not fear the dark." And with those words, she fell asleep, leaving Daniel sitting in the quiet chamber, his heart heavier yet strangely lighter at the same time. For the first time in his life, he felt not ordinary but needed. Truly needed. The first nights were only the beginning. The nights stretched into weeks, and what began as a duty slowly grew into something neither Daniel nor Sarai could ignore. At first, their time together had been marked by silence. Daniel would sit quietly, Sarai would rest, and the chamber would be filled only with the rhythm of breathing. But now silence was no longer enough. Their voices began to fill the space, hesitant at first, then steady, like a trickle of water turning into a stream. One evening, Sarai greeted him with an unusual request. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle hum that always lingered in her words. "Tell me a story." "Something from your world." "Something you have seen with your own eyes." Daniel blinked in surprise. "A story? I'm not very good at those." Her large, luminous eyes met his. "It does not have to be grand. Only true." He thought for a while, then began to speak. "When I was a boy, my family lived near the ocean. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the waves. They sounded like whispers, always moving, never ending. Sometimes, during storms, the waves would crash so loud it felt like the whole world was shaking. But the next morning, the sun always rose, calm and golden, as if nothing had happened. I guess it taught me that storms never last forever." Sarai listened without interrupting, her gaze fixed on him. When he finished, she whispered, "A simple story, yet it feels like a lesson." Daniel shrugged with a faint smile. "Maybe. Or maybe I just like the sound of the waves." That night, Sarai fell asleep with a trace of calmness Daniel had not seen before, as though the ocean itself had soothed her dreams. The next night, Sarai returned the favor. "I will tell you of my home," she said, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim chamber. "On Lumine, the nights are never dark. We have 2 moons, bright and silver, always crossing the sky together. One is large, soft, and glowing. The other is smaller, sharper, shining like a blade. They dance above us, chasing each other, never apart. My people say they are siblings who refuse to sleep alone." Her voice softened, almost breaking. "I miss them. Their light. Their promise that no one drifts in darkness." Daniel sat quietly, letting her words settle in his chest. "Sounds beautiful," he said. "Like the sky itself keeps you company." "Yes," she whispered, closing her eyes. "Company. That is the word." And she slept peacefully again. As the nights passed, these exchanges became a ritual. One night Daniel would tell a story, the next Sarai would share hers. They spoke of small things, food, colors, places they had seen. But hidden inside those small things were pieces of their hearts. Daniel learned that Sarai loved the scent of her people's flowering trees, blossoms that only bloomed once every 7 years. She told him she feared forgetting the sound of her mother's voice. which had always sung her to sleep. Sarai, in turn, learned that Daniel once dreamed of becoming a pilot, but gave up when his eyesight failed the strict tests. She learned that he carried an old coin from his father, worn and scratched but never left behind. Each detail, each word, was a thread, and slowly those threads wove a bond between them. But outside their chamber, not everyone approved. Rumors grew. Some aides whispered that the human was growing too close to the alien diplomat. Others said Sarai was placing too much trust in him. Daniel felt their stares when he walked the halls, the unspoken question in every glance. Why him? One evening, as he approached the chamber, 2 alien guards blocked his way. "You are only a human," one said coldly. "Her Excellency deserves better than a clerk with no title." Daniel clenched his fists but kept his voice calm. "She asked for me. That's all that matters." The guard said nothing more, but the weight of their disapproval followed him inside. When Sarai saw his troubled face, she tilted her head. "What weighs on you, Daniel?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Some people think I don't belong here, that you deserve someone more important." Sarai studied him for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Titles and ranks mean little in the dark. I do not need an ambassador or a soldier at my side. I need someone who will not leave when silence grows heavy." "That is you." Her words struck deep. For the first time, Daniel felt that he wasn't just filling a role. He was chosen. The bond between them deepened in ways neither could fully explain. One night, Sarai asked him a question she had never dared before. "Daniel, what do you dream of?" He was silent for a while, unsure how to answer. Dreams were personal, often fragile, but her eyes waited patiently. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "I dream I'm flying, not in a ship but with wings. I soar above mountains, over rivers, across oceans. There's no noise, no rules, no borders. Just freedom, I guess. I dream of escape." Sarai's eyes softened. "Then you are like me, for I dream of return. Not escape, but home." They looked at each other in the quiet chamber. 2 souls bound by different longings, one for freedom, the other for belonging, and in that moment, they understood each other more deeply than words could express. There were nights when Daniel caught himself forgetting the strange nature of his task. He no longer thought of himself as a sleep companion on assignment. Instead, he thought of himself as someone keeping a promise. He remembered the first night, when he had whispered, "I'll stay." That promise grew heavier with each passing day, but it was a weight he was willing to carry. One evening, when Sarai was already drifting toward dreams, Daniel whispered softly, "You're not alone anymore." She stirred faintly, her lips curving in a shadow of a smile. "Not alone," she echoed before sleep claimed her. But peace never comes without testing. As the bond deepened, political pressure outside grew harsher. Reports reached Daniel that rival delegates questioned Sarai's stability, pointing to her reliance on a human as proof she was weak. Some even demanded the arrangement end, fearing it gave humans undue influence. Ambassador Linton warned him carefully, "Daniel, you may not have much time left in this assignment. There are voices calling for your removal. Be ready." The thought shook Daniel more than he expected. Removal meant Sarai would face the nights alone again. And though he had no authority, no say in the great matters of diplomacy, the idea of leaving her in loneliness tore at him. That night, as he sat in the chamber, his face heavy with worry, Sarai noticed. "You carry shadows tonight," she said gently. Daniel hesitated, then told her the truth. "They might end this. My assignment. They think you shouldn't need me." Her eyes darkened, a storm of emotion flickering within them. For a long time she said nothing. Then in a voice barely above a whisper she replied, "Then they do not understand. You are not assignment. You are anchor." Daniel's throat tightened. He had no answer but silence. She reached out then, not touching but extending her hand slightly in his direction, a gesture of trust among her people. "Promise me, Daniel, even if they try to take you away. You will not leave without my word." He nodded firmly. "I promise." The bond was no longer silent companionship. It was trust. Deep, fragile, unspoken, but real. As the 3rd week ended, Daniel reflected on how much had changed. He had come into this chamber as a nervous clerk, confused and awkward. Now he sat with dignity, feeling not like a servant but a partner. Sarai, once restless and closed, now trusted him enough to share her dreams, her fears, her longings. She slept soundly because he was there, and Daniel realized he was changing too. He was learning patience, empathy, the power of simply being present. He was no longer the man who thought himself ordinary. The bond had deepened, and with it came the certainty that the nights ahead would test them even more. The bond between Daniel and Sarai had grown deep, but with it came new dangers. Outside the quiet chamber where their voices and silences were shared, the world of politics was growing louder, harsher, and less forgiving. Peace was fragile. The humans and the Lumine had come together to discuss trade, borders, and shared defense, but mistrust simmered beneath every handshake and every smile. And soon their private bond was no longer private. Rumors spread like fire. Daniel heard them first in the cafeteria of the diplomatic complex. Did you hear? The alien needs a human to sleep. It makes her weak. If she can't survive one night alone, how can she lead? And why him? Just a clerk. Maybe the humans are using him to control her. Daniel clenched his fists around his cup but said nothing. He knew if he argued, the whispers would only grow. But the words cut deep all the same. When he returned to the ambassador's office, Linton confirmed his fears. The council is restless. Some human delegates fear you're being used by the Lumine. Some of Sarai's own aides fear she is relying on you too much. They've begun to question whether this arrangement should continue. Daniel's heart sank. But she needs me. She hasn't slept without me in weeks. Linton's eyes softened, but his voice was steady. I know, but politics doesn't care for needs, Daniel. It cares for appearances. If Sarai looks dependent on a single human, it weakens her position. And if we're seen as using this bond to influence her, it weakens ours. The ambassador leaned forward. Be careful. A storm is coming. That night, Sarai noticed Daniel's troubled silence as soon as he entered the chamber. You walk heavy, she said softly, her eyes searching him. What shadows follow you tonight? Daniel hesitated. He wanted to protect her from the rumors, but lying felt wrong. They're talking about us. About this arrangement. They think it makes you look weak. They think I'm too close. Sarai's expression grew still, her luminous eyes unreadable. So they would rather I collapse from exhaustion than accept help from one unlike them. It's not fair, Daniel muttered. You're carrying the whole weight of peace on your shoulders, and they worry about appearances. For a long moment, Sarai was silent. Then she whispered, Would you leave if they ordered it? Daniel froze. The question pierced him deeper than he expected. His first thought was duty. If his leaders commanded it, wasn't he supposed to obey? But when he looked at her, sitting tall yet fragile in her solitude, he knew the answer. No, he said finally firmly. Not unless you ask me to. Something flickered in her eyes, relief, gratitude, and something softer unspoken. Then you are not just companion, she said. You are shield. Days passed and the storm grew stronger. Delegates whispered openly now. Some Lumine officials even confronted Sarai in the council chambers. You shame us, one declared harshly. To need a human beside you like a child with a nurse. You show weakness before our allies and our rivals alike. Sarai sat tall, her voice calm but firm. What you call weakness, I call truth. My kind was never meant to be alone in the dark. I will not pretend otherwise. Her words silenced the chamber, but they also sharpened the knives of her critics. That night, she entered her chamber weary and pale. Daniel watched as she sat heavily on the resting couch, her shoulders trembling. They do not understand, she whispered. They think strength is silence. They think pride is more important than peace. But I am so tired, Daniel, so tired of fighting shadows alone. Without thinking, Daniel moved closer, not touching, but near enough for his voice to reach her gently. You're not alone. You don't have to fight this by yourself. I'll be here no matter what they say. She closed her eyes, breathing in slowly as if drawing strength from his words. But the test of loyalty was not only whispers, it came as an order. One evening, before Daniel left for Sarai's chamber, Ambassador Linton stopped him with a grave face. Daniel, the council has voted. They've ordered you removed from the assignment. Tonight is to be your last night. The words hit Daniel like a hammer. What? No. You can't do that. She'll fall apart. Linton's eyes were filled with regret. I know, but the order is final. They believe continuing this will weaken both sides. I can't protect you from it. Daniel stood frozen. For the first time in his life, he wished he wasn't just a clerk. He wished he had power, authority, something more than his word. Instead, all he had was the truth. When he entered the chamber, Sarai immediately sensed his turmoil. "You walk with finality," she said softly. "What has happened?" Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to lie, to spare her, but he couldn't. "They're ending it. Tonight is supposed to be my last night here." Her eyes widened, luminous with shock and something deeper. Fear. "No, they cannot. Without you, the nights will break me." Daniel swallowed hard. "I told them," I argued. "But they won't listen." She rose, her tall form trembling with fury. "Then I will not accept it. I will not let them take you." Her voice, usually calm and melodic, rang with thunder. For a moment, Daniel glimpsed not only a weary diplomat but a leader of fire, capable of shaking councils with her will. Then her strength faltered, and she sank back onto the couch, her hands trembling. "Daniel, will you still come if they forbid it?" His answer came without hesitation. "Yes, I promised you, and I won't break it." Her eyes softened, filled with something almost like light. "Then you are mine, not theirs." That night was unlike any other. Sarai did not fall asleep immediately. Instead, she sat upright, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Daniel, listen. If they remove you, I will resist. But the cost may be high. They will call me unfit. They will say I cannot lead. And if that happens, the peace may fail." Daniel's chest ached. "Then don't risk it for me." Her eyes flashed. "Do not say that. You are not risk. You are reason I still breathe in the dark." Silence fell between them, heavy and fragile. Finally, she whispered, "Stay, Daniel. Not for duty. Not for orders. Stay because you choose." Daniel looked at her, at the alien diplomat who had crossed galaxies only to find herself utterly alone. And he knew his choice. "I'll stay," he said simply. "Always." Her lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "Then I will not fear." At last she lay down, her breathing slowing, her body relaxing. Daniel sat near, watching over her. The storm of politics raging outside but powerless within these walls. For in that moment, loyalty was not to council or country. It was to her, but storms do not vanish because two souls make promises. The following day, tension exploded. Rival factions accused Sarai of weakness, demanded her removal from the talks, and questioned the legitimacy of every decision she made. Human officials argued she had grown too close to one of their own. The peace itself hung in the balance. Daniel stood in the shadows of the council hall, watching as Sarai faced her accusers. Tall, regal, yet tired, she stood alone before dozens of voices. "You claim weakness where there is only truth," she said steadily. "Yes, I cannot sleep alone. Yes, I rely on a human. But strength is not the absence of need. It is the courage to admit it. And I will not hide mine." Her words echoed across the chamber. Some scoffed. Others fell silent, uneasy. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to step forward, to stand beside her, but he knew this was her fight. Still, he knew one thing for certain. No council, no vote, no storm could make him abandon her. That night, when they returned to the chamber, Sarai was weary but unbroken. She looked at Daniel with tired eyes and whispered, "We have been tested, and tomorrow the testing will grow harder. Will you still stand with me?" Daniel met her gaze, firm and unwavering. Always. The test of loyalty had begun, and neither of them knew how it would end. The final week of Daniel's assignment arrived quietly, almost impossibly. The storm of politics had subsided for now, but it left behind a lingering tension that could be felt even in the gentle glow of Sarai's chamber. Both human and alien had endured trials, tests of trust, endurance, and loyalty, and now they approached the moment when the assignment would end. Daniel had entered the chamber that night with the usual rhythm, yet something was different. He noticed the way Sarai's shoulders seemed lighter, though her eyes still held traces of fatigue. It was not the weight of loneliness pressing upon her anymore. It was the weight of responsibility she had carried for years, slowly eased by his presence. "Daniel," she said softly as he took his usual seat. "The council has declared my mission complete. Your assignment will end soon." Daniel nodded, swallowing the tightness in his throat. "I know," he said quietly. Her gaze lingered on him, searching for something she could not name. Then she exhaled, a faint, almost imperceptible sound like the last leaf falling from a tree. "These nights, you have given me more than rest. You have given me courage." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. "I only stayed because you asked me to." She shook her head slightly. It was more than asking. It was accepting. You accepted my loneliness. You accepted me. The next few nights were bittersweet. Daniel continued to sit beside her, knowing that soon he would not. Each moment became sharper, every glance heavier, every silence more meaningful. They spoke less now, not out of distance, but because words could not capture the depth of their shared experience. Instead, they existed together in quiet understanding. One night, Sarai spoke first. Daniel, when I return to Lumine, when I am surrounded by my people again, I will not need you by my side, but I will remember. Daniel's fingers tightened around his knees. I will remember too, he said softly. Every night, every story, every silence. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. You taught me that presence is stronger than distance. That trust is more powerful than fear. You were my anchor. Daniel's chest ached, and you were my guide. I learned more from sitting with you than I ever did in years of training or books. You showed me patience, empathy, courage. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two souls connected across species, across worlds, across the boundaries that usually kept them apart. The night before his official departure, the chamber felt heavier than usual. The air was still. The lamp glowed faintly, and the curtains swayed softly as if they too sensed the moment's gravity. Sarai lay on the resting couch, her body relaxed yet still tense in subtle ways. Daniel sat nearby, unable to tear his eyes away from her calm but tired form. You have stayed through my worst nights, she whispered. And never once did you complain. Never once did you falter. Daniel shook his head. I didn't stay because it was easy. I stayed because it mattered. Because you mattered. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Daniel saw a warmth there he had never fully seen before. A trust so profound it made the room feel smaller, as if the world outside no longer existed. Tomorrow, she said carefully, you will leave and I will be alone again, but I will not fear it, because you have given me strength I never knew I could have. Daniel leaned forward, voice low and steady. And you've given me something too, something I didn't expect. A friend. She tilted her head, studying him. Friend, yes, that word fits better than any title or rank. You're not my assignment anymore, Daniel. You are my friend. He smiled faintly, swallowing the lump in his throat. And you are mine. The final night was quiet, almost sacred. They did not speak much. Daniel merely sat near, ensuring she slept soundly. But every glance, every small movement carried the weight of unspoken words. Gratitude, respect, and the deep bond they had forged. As she drifted into sleep, Sarai murmured softly, Thank you, Daniel. For seeing me. For staying. Daniel's eyes glistened. You're welcome, Sarai. Always. The lamp cast soft shadows across the room, and Daniel felt the strange, heavy mix of endings and beginnings. This was the end of his assignment, but it was not the end of what they had shared. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be needed and to be trusted. Morning arrived slowly. Daniel packed his few belongings, careful not to disturb the room's delicate calm. Sarai had already risen, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered faintly in the morning light. She stood tall, regal, yet approachable. The weight of her burdens eased just enough to reveal the person beneath the diplomat's title. You are leaving, she said simply. Daniel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Yes, but not forever. I hope. She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. You will always be welcome. Always. Daniel extended his hand, and for the first time there was no hesitation, no protocol. She accepted it, their fingers brushing lightly. A gesture of trust, respect, and friendship. Farewell, Daniel, she whispered. Not as companion, not as human assigned to me, but as friend. Remember me when you see the twin moons. Daniel nodded, feeling tears prick at his eyes. I will, and I will remember you too. Every night we shared, every story, every silence. Outside, the world continued its rhythm, unaware of the quiet bond that had grown in the dim chamber. Daniel walked through the halls one last time, the whispers and stares of others now meaningless. The assignment was over, but the lessons he had learned about patience, empathy, trust, and courage would stay with him forever. He glanced back once, seeing Sarai standing tall in the doorway of her chamber, watching him leave. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange no words were necessary. They understood each other completely. Weeks later, Daniel would think of those nights often. He would remember the way she spoke softly in the dark, the rhythm of her breathing, the gentle sway of the curtains, and the quiet glow of the lamp. He would remember the stories he told, the stories she shared, the shared moments that had brought two very different worlds together in harmony. Sarai would carry those memories too. She would remember the human who had accepted her loneliness, who had stayed when everyone else questioned the need, who had become more than a duty, more than an assignment, who had become her friend. And somewhere, across the stars, they would both feel the quiet echo of that trust and presence. The nights they shared had changed them, not because of politics or duty, but because two beings had chosen to see each other, not as titles, not as assignments, but as souls. In the end, Daniel understood something he had never known before. True connection is not measured by time, proximity, or even species. It is measured by trust, empathy, and the courage to stay when all else falls away. And Sarai, the solitary alien diplomat, had taught him this lesson. Just as he had, in his quiet human way, given her the strength to sleep, to trust, and to face the world again. They parted as friends, but the bond would endure far longer than the assignment ever could. And in that quiet, simple truth lay the power of humanity, its capacity to touch lives across stars, species, and solitude itself. Daniel stepped out into the sunlight, heart heavy, yet full. Somewhere far away, Sarai would look at the twin moons and remember him, and he would smile, knowing that even across the vast distance they had changed each other forever. The assignment had ended, but the friendship, the trust, and the shared nights would never fade, and for both human and alien that was enough.